have our last presentation today is Thomas. Could you probably share your screen? Who's going to also continue on this social aspect with a computing experiment, software experiment on users. So
Right.
Thomas, can you share your
Um,
screen and
yep. So we'll be mostly focusing on the survey aspect,
okay.
but there are experiments undergoing currently. Uh,
Okay,
get,
so everyone is good here? Okay, Thomas, it's up to you. Go ahead.
all right. My microphone is working correctly.
Yeah, we
Okay,
can hear you.
perfect. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to present myself again. My name is Thomas Zaragoza. I'm a PhD student here at the University of Pau in the Pays de la Dour. And today I will be presenting on behalf of my co-authors, understanding end user perspective on software energy consumption. So to start off briefly with the motivations behind our research, it's no secret that ICT has been on a steady rise as a greenhouse gas emitter, and it's projected to continue increasing in the coming decades if left unchecked. ICT has a complex dual role as both an agent for sustainability, but also as a patient. The former often distracts from the latter, as ICT has been quite effective at decarbonizing other fields like transportation and agriculture. In this context, we refer to ICT as IT for green. However, even when ICT is the target for sustainability efforts, approaches generally tend to focus on hardware or algorithmic optimizations, leaving the end user variable in the equation overlooked, despite 70% of emissions originating from the use phase. So the use phase is emissions associated with the operation of a product or service throughout its intended lifespan, particularly energy related emissions from the electrical consumption of computing devices. User behavior can impact this electrical consumption, particularly through software via a variety of actions, including but not limited to app choices, multitasking, and feature usage. A responsible user who chooses an energy conscious software alternative and cuts down on wasteful computing and unnecessary features can reduce their footprint. So, with the aim of targeting end users and better understanding the rationale behind their behavior, we sought to answer the following research question: what is the end user's perspective on energy consumption in software? So, to answer this question, we conducted a survey as well as a few semi structured interviews on campus to explore users and their perspectives on energy consumption in software. More precisely, we broke this question down into three distinct constructs: construct one, perception; construct two, comprehension; and then construct three, action, which I will further detail as I address them. So the survey had a sample size of 286 respondents, consisting of both students and staff, and was conducted here on UPA campus using the online surveying tool Sphinx. The interviews were similarly conducted here on campus on 5 respondents, all students, and only required audio recording tools as well as automatic transcription software. So the survey was composed of 2 sections. The first section aimed to profile users based on common socio-demographic variables such as age, gender, socio-professional category, and both the field and level of education. But we also aimed to profile users based on their environmental views. For this, we gauged their views using a Likert scale statement similar to those of the New Environmental Paradigm Scale, the NEP scale. But we also try to profile them based on their software usage, based on the types of software they use, their familiarity with computing, and their average screen time per day. And then the second section consists of 18 statements divided into 3 constructs, so the constructs I introduced before, as well as ranking tasks where we ask users to rank the perceived impact of software compared to hardware on the total energy consumption of a device, and to compare different types of software among themselves. And when I say types, I'm talking about the use cases of software, so what their intended use is for, like navigation, editing media, entertainment, video games, etc. So today I will be mainly discussing key findings related to the 3 constructs. But first, to do so, I think it's nice for a bit of context to briefly introduce the survey participants. So of the 286 respondents, nearly 60% were women. A significant portion of respondents were aged 18 to 24, reflecting that the majority of student population in our study, while the staff respondents were distributed across the other age brackets, with only 65 years plus being severely underrepresented. There was a wide variety of educational backgrounds and levels, with the notable exception of respondents with a vocational certificate or no higher education who were underrepresented. Similarly, students from a health or sports background were not very represented. On the other hand, there was a disproportionate number of respondents from natural and technological science education backgrounds, which again can be attributed to the nature of the survey being on campus here at UPA. A majority of respondents reported either being or having a parent in the socio-professional category of executives and higher intellectual professions, with farmers, workers, and trade peoples being underrepresented. So we describe the first construct, the C1 perception, as users' awareness of and attention to the concept of energy consumption in ICT and software. We found that users' attention varied notably according to age, education, environmental sensitivity, and screen time. So we presented users with the following assertion: I consider myself attentive to my energy consumption when using computer devices. And we found that 54% of respondents claim to pay attention to their energy consumption when using IT devices. When we decomposed these answers by level of education, we notice a trend for higher attentiveness with higher education. The most attentive groups claiming to have master degrees and doctorates, respectively 57.5% attentive and 66.1% attentive. While respondents with a high school diploma surveyed as being the least attentive, with only 40% claiming attentiveness. We have excluded vocational certificates as they are underrepresented. And it's important to note that this trend also translates to age, as the youngest portion of candidates, so between 18 and 24, were also the least attentive to energy consumption. So we describe the second construct, C2, comprehension, as users' understanding of the causes, variability, and technical aspects of energy consumption in software. Among the key insights, we discover that there's a link between attentiveness and comprehension, as well as gaps in users' understanding of their software energy consumption, both theoretically and tangibly. This gap was influenced again by the age and education of respondents. So we presented the following statement to respondents: I know how to interpret signs of a high energy consumption during my use of computing devices, and found that little over half of respondents claim to be able to interpret such signs. And when we cross this with the previous statement on attentiveness, We do see that a majority of those who claim to be attentive also claim to be able to interpret signs of high energy consumption, and vice versa. A majority of those who claim to be inattentive do not claim to be able to. This statement was followed with another, being, I understand what is meant by the energy consumption of software applications. So here we're centering more on the software side of energy consumption rather as IT devices as a whole. And again, we found more positive responses than the previous one, with a little under 55% of respondents claiming to understand. And if we break down by education once more, we see a tendency for higher education levels to correspond with a better understanding of software energy consumption, with both master's and doctorate holders having over 60% claiming to understand software energy consumption. However, this understanding remains conceptual, as when we ask respondents if they could tangibly understand the energy consumption of their devices, what it represents, fewer than 20% answered positively compared to the 55% for the previous assertion. Finally, we describe the third construct, C3 action, as users' behaviors related to energy consumption in software. We found again a recurrent link between attention and action, as well as significant gaps between belief and concrete actions, especially influenced by age, environmental sensitivity, and the amount of screen time on average. Respondents cited a lack of knowledge and constraints, both workload and technical, as the greatest barriers to taking action. So when we asserted, I regularly take actions to reduce my energy consumption when using computer devices, we found that a majority of respondents claim to not take actions to reduce their energy consumption. When crossed with the initial assertion of attentiveness, we again notice that there's a significant majority of respondents who claim attentiveness also report taking action. And on the opposite side, there's an even greater majority of respondents who claim non-attentiveness and also report not taking action. So with the aim of understanding respondents' inaction, we also presented the following statement, which is, users' efforts are not useful because reducing the energy consumption of our computing devices is a matter for engineering and science. So the hypothesis and this was that users may shift the responsibility onto others, thinking that hardware and software should be greener, not them. However, a crushing majority of respondents responded negatively, believing that efforts were useful, and this is contrasting with the amount of respondents that claim to take actions, highlights the gap between a will to do better and the execution. So there were limitations to our approach, notably the scope of our study being conducted on a university campus, which is less representative of a general population. The underrepresentation of certain profiles, as you can see on the nearby graph. And additionally, there's a risk of a self-reporting bias where users base their answers on memory or perception, which may be factually incorrect. So in conclusion, the study highlighted gaps in end users' perspectives on software energy consumption, with 91.5% claiming to understand device energy use, but only 55.3% claiming to understand software energy use. These gaps also exist between the will to act and concrete actions, with only 94.6 claiming that monitoring energy consumption is important, but only 54.3 actually doing so, and 79.3% believing individual efforts matter, but only 46.8% claiming to take action. So to help bridge these gaps, future works on the topic should aim to break down these recurring barriers, namely users' lack of knowledge on how to act, the importance of software's role, and overcoming the perceived constraints of behavioral change among high screen time users. Oh, is there a gray screen for everyone else? Oh, there you go. Thank you. I will be now taking any questions.
Okay, thank you. If you have questions, again, go to the microphone up. And if remotely you have questions, we can't see the screen, so just speak if you have any question up there.
Yes, I do have a curiosity. As you have highlighted an attitude behavior gap, I mean, like, especially at the end of your presentation, like, people think it's important and they can have an impact, but they do not actually do so. Are you interested in investigating in which way they would want to act to be part of the initiative, or do they understand that how they can be part of it? Because you mentioned knowledge constraint, but is it on the behaviors that they can implement the constraint?
Right. So we were quite limited on since it's a survey format. We were quite limited on investigating the why there is a gap. We did try to ask users who claim to not take actions why did they not take actions, and we left the multiple choice answers. And so the majority cases, users would claim to just simply not have the knowledge of how to shift their behavior. If at the end of the day, if they had the knowledge, would they shift behaviors? That would be an kind of another debate, because it could also just be an excuse, or it's the first barrier, and once that's broken down, we arrive to the next barrier, which is, oh, I use my PC for work. I don't have time to change my behavior. I'm working. This is very important. Uh, but that is the initial barrier that most users we've surveyed seem to hit.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, just briefly, can you go back to the third takeaway you had on your last slide, because it went a bit fast and it seemed.
Yes.
Yeah, high screen time. What's the outcome here, please?
Right. So we've noticed that among high screen time users, so this is like 6 to 8 hours of screen time per day, they would have they would have their barrier for not taking action, which would often not be a lack of knowledge, but be more of a technical constraint of, I don't have time to do that, or the purpose for me being on the computer, as I've stated in the previous question, is more important than going out of my way and changing my behavior to potentially reduce my impact. So because we found that users with a low screen time, so a few hours a day, casual uh, computing device users would be more willing, more open to taking actions, while high screen time users were definitely more constrained, at least felt more constrained to do so.
Okay, any more questions? So I cannot ask, he's my PhD student, so someone have to. Okay.
I may have another one, because what you mentioned right now, it looks like your respondents might feel guilty when they use a lot of screens per day and so on. Do you plan in your PhD to work on possible negative emotions to understand that?
I think I understand. We definitely not as invested uh, psychologically on the needs and the impact it could have on users. When we are, because we do have experiments on human participants, and when putting into place these experiments, we do try to go out of our way to make sure that candidates, feel safe, that they don't feel, the potential negative emotional reactions from not changing their behavior. We haven't had a return from any of the candidates that they felt something negatively, but then again, they could just also not tell us. We haven't looked into it too deeply. We
Yeah, sure.
mostly looked at it from a computer science point of view, where we're judging how annoying the software is perceived by them, rather than the I guess the what's the word for it? Uh, sense of responsibility is.
No, sure. I was not saying to make them feel guilty, but if it is what they experience, just to give them the opportunity to say it, not to provoke it. For instance, why do you act for the environment, or why don't you act for the environment? It makes me feel anxious, has a possible answer. Eco-anxiety is actually a strong barrier in acting for the environment. You just keep the information, you get blind so that you don't feel guilty. If I don't know, I'm not guilty. I'm not responsible, I'm not guilty. So it's also a protection devices, psychological mechanism to protect oneself. But I'm not saying provoke it, but just if you had the opportunity to give it, in multiple choice questions, just put these type of elements to know more about your population. That was just a comment.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And I definitely feel like there's a sense of eco anxiety, just from the results of our survey in general. I personally like when we met, when we did this survey. Of course, it's anonymous, so this is supposed to try and limit this sense of, I guess, shame, or guilt is the better word for it. Since answers are anonymous, you should potentially be more honest, but there's definitely a chance, a possibility that users perhaps lie to themselves. And maybe it would be nice to have a few additional questions to try to get a sense for that, because it could definitely impact the results. For example, with 46.8% claiming to take action, are these values a true reflection of the factual actions being taken, or is it in part some of this inner guilt being reflected into their fake, I guess, reality? Where, oh yeah, I definitely think I take actions. I remember doing this one time, but I would definitely be interested if you have papers, like resources on the matter, on how this sort of behavior, this responsibility, can be gauged in users to integrate into future works of mine.
Sure, definitely. We can talk afterwards. But that's definitely a big issue in studies related to sustainability and environmental behaviors, because actually people know it's important. It's like the big message of the last few years. So they know it's socially super important. So even if it's anonymous, people want to make their answers look like good, even if it's only for themselves. So it's a common bias, a common issue in studies related to sustainability. I mean, it's a common.
Definitely, I definitely think that has an impact on the survey, which is why also maybe doubling the survey with an actual in-field experiment maybe could validate the claims of users, since there will be more real data to corroborate their perceptions and claims.
Definitely. Thanks, Thomas.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Thomas.
Thank you for the question.
I just want to add up since apparently you wanted more questions, and I always so I'm a bit active in ecologistic movements, and it's really fun to see how the ones that are already doing a lot feel like doing more even. It seems that there's a correlation between eco-anxiety and action, so a negative correlation. If you know about the ecology, even if you are doing gardening, you know, and you don't have a lot to do with IT, you feel prone to, you know, get the information to act. You know, it's these people, the ecologists, the activists, they tend to mind their mailbox. So I tell them, like, you know, don't spend too much time on that in particular because it's not the low-hanging fruit. So yeah, but information workers that are overworked through ICT, so they spend 10 hours a day on their computer, but they don't have time as part of their work to improve the situation for themselves. Indeed, I guess that they must be pretty eco-anxious. And so I was really glad to give courses to students about sustainability and stuff like that, because the pressure on their shoulder lowered as they learned. So yeah, I guess that you could try to see this correlation between knowledge about ecology and guilt, eco-anxiety. And since overworked people doing information science or information work, doing 10 hours a day, are not going to find the time to get accustomed to sustainability. So yeah, but it was just to abound with Madame. I don't see your name, Aurore, sorry. Yeah, and good luck. It's yeah, a really nice topic about eco-anxiety and yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. It's a great remark. That definitely kind of echoes, at least in my opinion, the findings of the survey on both aspects. On the first aspect, we definitely found that candidates who were on the higher quartile of environmental sensitivity, those who were most sensitive to environmental topics, were definitely portraying a bigger will to act, a bigger will to change their behavior compared to those who weren't. And your remark on teaching those who spend a lot of time on their screens how to feel less eco conscious is definitely, I think, a good idea to approach that initial barrier I presented according to high screen users, where they have these more perceived constraints. So that's definitely a very interesting way of tackling that first barrier for those who are also the most involved in ICT consumption.
Thanks a lot. It's a very and I was really pleased with the time you took to present the respondents and stuff like that. So very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Thomas.
If I just may I comment on that, I think it was a very good example. The fact that with the classes, his students feel actually more empowered and less anxious about sustainability. And it's really consistent with the first barrier, lack of knowledge. But it's also possible in the extent that the students actually have what we call perceived behavioral control that I presented at the end of the presentation, that they understand that the action can have a positive impact. And maybe, Thomas, in your study, you do have people that even if they have the knowledge, they might still feel insecure. And when you go to the experiment, to the field, you might want strategies like nudges, that people might not need to understand fully all the why and how and so on, and they still can have a positive impact by a simple nudge or something that is easier for people that are not so much of the field. So really important to take into consideration, even if people have knowledge, the extent to which they feel that they have behavioral control.
Yeah, I agree, and I definitely feel like even perhaps that the more knowledge you have, maybe the more insecure you are about it. Perhaps even. At least that's something I've noticed in general as a trend. So yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And if you want to know more details about this paper, including a field study Thomas did, he'll be presenting it next week at East Conference in Turkey, if anyone is there. But the paper itself is already published. You can check the title of the paper as well.
To add to that, we also have, I believe we have the database for the survey is also open source. If anyone else also wants to look into it, because maybe they have a question that we haven't answered or we haven't analyzed in a particular way.
Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. So thank you, everyone. I don't think we have time to do the discussion. I'll reshare my screen. So the idea was to have some discussions about a few questions, but we have 5 minutes. So the idea is I'm going to show you the questions so you think about them and discuss about them throughout the conference. So the first one was thinking of how we design objects and software that are efficient, but that will push users to have green usage of our applications. So how can we redesign software, not to optimize the software technically itself, but to make its usage more efficient? You know, if you can understand that this small nuances between green software itself and green usage of software. So that was the first topic of discussion. And then we wanted to talk about how we make sure that people accept this energy efficient behavior, because usually we have some trade-offs, some discomfort from the users. If they want to use more energy efficient solutions with sometimes less performance, you know, what Aurore was talking about, the perception of, you know, green is slow and performance is fast. So what incentives would we put in place in tech, in software and computing, but also from the other aspects of design and social behavior? And the last question is, how can we rethink this problem of software solutions by building this bridge between different communities? Because so far we are really optimizing software and hardware, and you know, every community is distinct. We build energy efficient software, we try to work on the social aspect, psychological aspect, but we don't communicate all together. And at the end, we have solutions that are maybe efficient, but they're not accepted by the user, and vice versa. So how can we work together and interact between our different communities? So these were the topics of discussion. This is why the presentation were around these topics.